Hi there.
Hi, I think we are live to everybody.
Wonderful.
Awesome. All right. Um, if people can hear us, can you let us know in the chat? Do people know how to use the chat? We'll give it a few more minutes. All right. So if you can hear us, please put your name in the chat to everyone, if you can. Not sure if you have that ability. It looks like you might on this platform. My name is Joey Pacific, and this is Laura DeLucia. Laura, thank you for joining the panel.
I'm so excited to be here. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. We had a few last minute cancellations for the careers and operations panel. So you all get to get a private conversation between me and Laura. Laura and I worked together for the last few months of the Biden campaign last year. So I'm excited to get the chance to talk to her again. Um, I guess I can start with a little bit about me. I've been working in operations for like 7 years now. I got my start on the Hillary campaign and then worked in Virginia politics for a good amount of time. Was the 2017 operations director for the coordinated. Following that, I was an independent operations consultant working with some state parties and campaigns, managing some of their operations processes and staff. And then in the 2019-2020 cycle, I was the COO for Pete Buttigieg's campaign, and then got the chance to work on the Biden campaign in the last few months doing GOTV and vote by mail operations. Right now, I am just starting out a company actually called Optimize, which provides operations and human resources services and advising to campaigns and political organizations. Laura, do you want to give a brief intro on yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Laura DeLucia. Currently, I am the Director of State Operations at the DNC. Before that, I had a very similar position on the Biden campaign at the national level. Before that, I was in the New Hampshire primary as the Director of Operations. Don't know if you want me to go through the whole the whole background.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, maybe I'll start from the beginning in that case. I've been doing this, I think, for about 22 years. In 2000, in high school, I grew up in Manchester, New Hampshire, which is, as you know, first in the nation presidential primary. So my high school social studies teacher is really responsible for getting me involved, volunteering on that campaign. Really caught the bug there, which then led me to the Howard Dean campaign. So I was interning on the Howard Dean campaign, which is really where I fell in love with operations, really seeing how technology and operations could really make a huge difference in terms of like efficiency and getting things done. Um, then I moved over to NGP Software, which is now NGP Van. At the time, it was very much in startup mode. So we were in the founder's townhouse. There were 10 of us, I think. And also just like an operational, dream in terms of inventing a company, putting processes and systems together, and also sort of learning more about technology. And it all, each step kind of led to the next. So during NGP, I had a contact on Obama's Senate race at the time. And so when he decided to run for president, I reached out and said, I want to get involved. So I headed up to New Hampshire to work on the primary in 2008 for the campaign. And then I headed over to the DNC during the campaign as the operations liaison as we started to figure out what that looked like for the general. And then I was able to go to the White House as director of operations for presidential personnel, working on all the operations of setting up those systems and kind of figuring out how all those processes would work. And then, I did a couple of operational things that were unrelated to campaigns, but very similar to campaign logistics, working at a think tank, Tough Mudder, and another tech company. But in 2019, when I saw that Trump was coming up for election again, I just couldn't sit on the sidelines. I had loved working with Vice President Biden in the administration. And so I jumped on the campaign, went back to New Hampshire, kind of did my thing all over again. And that took me where I am now.
Awesome. That's great. Since this is a careers and operations panel, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your current role. I know that you just started it not that long ago, but could talk about a little bit about what your day-to-day is and kind of the things that you're hoping to do.
Yeah, definitely. So state operations for the 2022 cycle, we're still kind of in the early stages. So it's a really critical point, as you know, in figuring out strategically what all the operations systems in all of the states will look like. Hiring is super important, making sure we're getting those right operations directors, deputy operations directors, all the ops staff in place. Because they're going to be so essential to building all those blocks. So it's a lot of putting together those pieces, really making sure that we're heading in the right direction before we actually sort of start the rest of the work.
Yeah, it's you guys are getting started really early, which is really great to hear, and like I feel really good about it. I'm really glad that you're there and working on it right now. I guess, thinking about this cycle, I'm trying to think about how we can discuss for people in the audience what sort of operations opportunities are going to be available. And, obviously we don't know the exact jobs in the exact states just yet, because I think it's still in the very beginning, like you said, planning stages and hiring stages for directors. But what is your sense of opportunities that might exist in the midterm general election for people interested in getting into operations for the first time?
Yeah, definitely. We are still looking for operations directors in the state. So that's kind of a more senior role. You're really on the leadership team on the coordinated campaign. So it's helpful to have, a cycle or two of experience on a campaign. I personally am very open to, anyone that has operations backgrounds. If you are a problem solver, if you're someone that is willing to just jump in and like get your hands dirty, and you do have some experience doing operations, building systems, that sort of thing, I think you really can have success. So that's definitely a really key role in some of the battleground states, and there are definitely some.
I think that's the best job in the world.
State
so operations director. It's the best job.
Yeah, it's really, and it's so cool to see building it from scratch. It's not easy, certainly, but to take literally nothing in the beginning, you don't even have offices or anything like that, and to see it grow into like this massively efficient operation in the end is super rewarding. And then the deputy operations director. So that's also a fantastic role where maybe you don't have specific operations experience. Maybe you were doing something else. You have volunteered on a campaign. So you have like a sense of what needs to happen, but you'd want to sort of shadow the operations director. And maybe that's the next step in your career. It's just a really awesome job where no 2 days are alike. You really get to like experience all sides of the organization. And, I think either of those positions, even if you don't want to stay in campaigns for the rest of your life, you could go on to start your own business. Like you see so many facets of operations that you get a fantastic, well-rounded experience.
Yeah, I think that operations really provides some of the probably the most applicable skills to outside of campaigns of any role. Is it's all, I mean, it's all the same. Like it's every organization needs to hire people and needs to pay their bills and most need to open physical office spaces and like have send products around, whether it's digitally or physically, and it's all just the same mindset. um Speaking of sort of you know transferring to other stuff, you've done some work outside of campaigns, and I'm wondering if you could talk about w- what it's like to transition from campaigns to um, operations roles in other areas, and then also I think applicable to this audience, transfer skills from outside of campaigns to campaigns.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, so many things are similar. And on a campaign, you're in this pressure cooker where everything's moving incredibly fast. And if you can manage to keep up and survive in that world, you can literally do anything. So, moving to another organization is, it's going to be challenging in other ways, but I think nothing compares to sort of the intensity and the high profile nature, right? You're doing things where if something goes wrong, you're concerned that it's going to get in the news or something like that. So after the White House, I went over to Tough Mudder to do operations. So I was an operations director, manager there, which involved like traveling around the country and putting on events. So it felt very similar, honestly. You were going to sort of an empty field, figuring out, where do we start from here? All the logistics, the ordering, the purchasing, the procurement. It was incredibly similar. And I think like I had a lot of success there because of the campaign and all of those systems and best practices that you learn. And if you love a Google sheet, I think you can succeed in operations anywhere.
That's
So
right.
yeah, even though the subject matter is different, you can still succeed. And I think one of the other things that you learn from a campaign is the vendor relationships and relationships in general, how to build those, how to work with people closely. That's extremely beneficial when you go to other organizations. And then from Tough Mudder, I went to a national security think tank, the Center for a New American Security, which is wildly different, in a subject matter in terms of
Right.
from Tough Mudder, much more sort of formal. But they also were in the growing stages. I think they were 3 or 4 years old when I started. So they also needed a lot of help with building HR systems, hiring systems, making things more efficient. We had a very small operations team. So really applying those same skills in a different area was
Hmm.
really useful. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Um, all right. I'll have more questions, of course, but if there are people who have any questions, please feel free to dump them in the chat, and we'll get to them. Questions for either of us. For people who've joined since we introed, my name is Joey Pacific. This is Laura DeLucia. We've been working in operations both for a good amount of time, and we're excited to have you all here. Um, so, Laura, you've hired a lot of operations staff. As people who may be looking for operations roles in the future, what are some things that you look for if people don't necessarily have like direct operations experience? What is something that you look for to hire maybe a junior, like a operations assistant, deputy operations director, something like that?
Yeah, I'm always looking for, and I'm one of the types of people that I think like anyone can do this work if they are like inspired enough, if they have sort of the
Hmm.
certain qualities about them. So I'm looking for like number one, a problem solver, somebody that's
Right.
like willing to dig in and stick with it when it gets tough or frustrating and figure a way out, right? Find a way. So on a resume, I'm looking for that. It's a little more difficult to describe on your resume, but I think there's some ways you can do it. And then if you get to the interview stage, of course, that's a really great opportunity to sort of highlight that. And then
Hmm.
someone who is a lover of efficiency and improving processes, which I think you can show that in any part of your life. If you've organized a birthday party or something, you have project management experience, you've sort of
Hmm.
figured out these systems. So I think you've lived your life, and there are certainly ways that you can express how you love efficiency. And then someone that has excellent attention to detail, that is just a key part of operations. So, on your resume, making sure that there aren't any typos, that you're sending it to someone else to review. I do, of course, everyone is human and makes mistakes, but if they're all over the place, maybe that's someone that's
Right.
going to have a hard time with certain things in operations. And then a team player, someone that's willing to get their hands dirty and help
Hmm.
out. Maybe it's not even necessarily their world. So and then someone just willing to learn is really the last thing, that's curious and excited and wants to get involved in all sorts of different areas.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's true. Like when I'm hiring people, um, I think yeah, the curiosity is like a big one. Like you want people are who are like really excited to make things better and like figure out where you can improve and do it. And so like it's very difficult sometimes to discern that, like you said, from a resume. I always try to ask a question in an interview, sort of like what is a time when you have improved an organization that was not a regular part of your job to improve that organization. And because you're looking for people who are um, you know deliberate and constantly trying to find new ways to make things better, because they do that in their personal lives anyway. And so as Laura said, when you are crafting your resume, um you know make sure you find those things that you were doing in your job that weren't necessarily in the job description, and putting those in, um to just show those skills, and those that desire to constantly improve. Um, so moving on sort of from what we're looking for, would love to hear a little bit more, Laura, about uh, your start in operations. And you kind of touched on it a little bit, but would love to hear sort of what were you doing in your first like real operations job, and like what did you like about it?
Yeah, I think, my first real job out of college was at NGP, which is just, I found an ad in the Washington City paper back in the day when it was like a paper news ad, and it was like Craigslist. So it's a miracle that, the founder, Nathaniel Perlman, and I just hit it off. He is absolutely one of those people. I mean, every day I would hear him say, there's got to be a better way, because in technology, I think that really helped me too. It was a tech place. So they're like, we know that we have the tools to make things a lot more efficient, not just 1%, thousands of times more efficient. And so every day that was kind of drilled into my head. And I had seen that on the Dean campaign too, that one little system that you yourself have fixed could make a huge difference. And then once, I think I love sort of creating systems that would run themselves, because then the people doing that, the subject matter that are, on campaigns doing organizing or political, they can focus on, their core work there, and they don't have to worry about, all these, the receipts and the processes and sort of the mundane stuff. That stuff is as efficient as it could be. So, that was just a critical experience. And to your point of helping out with things that weren't in your lane at all, I started out as the personal assistant to the founder. So I started out, I
Yeah.
mean, I broke down so many recycling boxes and built so much furniture. So there were little things where I was just willing to do whatever it takes. And I don't know, where that came from, but so there was a period of time where I was just like, what is this job? But I
Right.
persevered, and I would, I would just insert myself into areas where I thought that they could be improved. So for example, we didn't have any sort of a customer management system. So people would call us on the phone asking for tech support. We were helping the Hillary campaign, big campaigns, and we'd put them on Post-it notes and they would get lost, and then the message wouldn't get. So I was like, we got to find a better way, right? So
Hmm.
I figured out how to use Microsoft Access. I built a little database that, I mean, it was not perfect. But that was just an example of like, that wasn't my job, but I had a little extra time and I thought that we can improve things. So just jumping in and getting experience that way.
Yeah, awesome. Um, Totally switching gears from you and me. Um, we I think have similar experiences in the types of operations that we've worked on, but we've not done uh, all of the aspects of operations. I think that there is, we've done a lot of the um, active and logistical operations, but there's also other things like other more specific areas of operations for people who, don't necessarily like who aren't interested in the kind of things that we've been talking about. There's other areas of operations as well. There's IT, there's HR, there's compliance. Um, could you talk a little bit about, in your experience, what opportunities are available for people outside of the like field operations or state operations roles that you've seen other people maybe transition to from a deputy operations director or even just from outside of operations into something like that?
Yeah, definitely. I think HR is one of those areas where
Hmm.
it's, a certain type of person that wants to be in HR. And as an operations director in a state, you certainly get exposed to that. Sometimes you're sort of serving in an informal role in that way, but there's so much more training that you could do, and professional courses, that sort of thing. So if you want to go on an HR sort of track, that's something where you could start off in an operations position on a campaign, see if that's something that interests you and really dig into that. And I think similarly with operations, you could go into HR in any organization. Everyone has an HR department and really apply those skills.
Hmm.
And it's a much more, it's interesting that HR and like the larger operations go together because I tend to find folks in operations to be very process oriented.
That's right.
HR
Yeah.
involves a whole skill set of really just like empathy and people skills, communications, like a lot of these other skills, working with the legal team that maybe don't necessarily exist on the other side. So I think it's an
Hmm.
area where if you find that that's your skill set, your sweet spot, that's really great. It's hard to find good HR directors for
That's right.
campaigns. So that's an area where you could really get your foot in the door.
Yeah, definitely. Um, we have a good question here about, you know, this person has 9 years of running their own business. And so, Laura, how would you recommend that they market themselves to land a job in operations?
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's wonderful. I am positive that you have so many of the skills that campaigns are looking for, operations in every other industry. I think it's interesting coming out of running your own business, I'm sure, because you probably haven't created a resume in 9 years, maybe. So, outlining, being very specific, because I think that you've done budgeting, that you've done expense. I'm sure as a small business, you've done all of this stuff yourself. So really just like outlining that, and I always say, think of it from the perspective of the person interviewing you or hiring you. We tend to be all in our sort of own mindset, but think about what they're looking for. So really like outline your budget experience, your, HR, dealing with people experience, procurement, purchasing, that sort of thing. HR if you have it, and take a look at the job description and really look at the top few items and see what they're really looking for, and then just be really thoughtful about thinking about what kind of experience you've had in terms of running your own business. And then when you get to the leadership, or when you get to the interview portion, you can really lean on the leadership aspect, because
Hmm.
running your own
Right.
business is something where you have to make quick decisions all the time. All of those things are super valuable that a lot of people in more junior roles probably haven't had.
Yeah, totally. I completely agree. And I think I would also highlight your adaptability. You know, running your own business requires you to constantly be pivoting and working with other vendors. And like, I think as a concern someone may have is someone who hasn't done campaigns before or has spent a lot of time out of campaigns. And in, private sector world is just, are they ready for the hustle of a campaign? And I think running your own business does provide that as someone who's starting their own business right now. It requires hustle, it requires adaptability, and definitely everything that Laura said is highlighting all of those specific skills, and then also kind of tying it together with like, I have done this before, never in a campaign setting, but I have done all of this before and I'm ready to go. I think will go a long way. We've got another question here. Someone who's been a paid canvas director, and what operational skills can they highlight?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's huge, and that involves so many logistics. So thank you for your work on all of that. I think I would highlight I'm sure you had to do a ton of hiring, getting people on board super quickly. So I would really highlight that, especially now, right now in the cycle, at the beginning of a cycle, you're so focused on hiring. And so anything you can do to highlight maybe some systems that you set up in terms of hiring, just the operational side of that. And then the logistics, I'm sure you also had a lot of materials, maybe PPE, if you did it during this last cycle. I would, it's strange, but right now, COVID operations has kind of taken on, at least in the campaign world, has taken on COVID policies and COVID safety. So if you can highlight that, that's a super valuable skill that everyone is still looking for as things continue to evolve with variants and things like that. And keep trying, don't give up. I saw you said you were rejected from an operations boot camp. Sometimes someone just, misses your resume or they don't see something that's valuable on it. So certainly send me your resume, send us your resume. And if you're really passionate about it, I'm sure you'll get in.
Yeah. And you never know exactly what people are looking for. And so like, certain boot camps may be like they're looking for like very senior people who have done operations before, or, I think that Laura, I think that you are planning to do some sort of something for operations people through the DNC, and I guess earlier this year, and we're working on planning for next year, is Ops Next, second year of an operations conference that I helped put on and Laura spoke at. So there's a lot of things that you can do to kind of get your resume out there and kind of find the right opportunity. I would not be discouraged from one rejection. Everyone's looking for different things. I think that being a paid canvas director is an extremely applicable job to being in operations. And so, like exactly what Laura said, is highlighting all of those logistical aspects and just kind of highlighting your systems thinking. It will go a long way. Any other? Oh, we do have more questions. Here we go. Just reading some of these. Yes, we should give our contact info. Laura, do you want to give your email real quick, if you feel comfortable?
Sure. I'm trying to see if I could type it in the chat so you have it here. I don't know if I can. So it's Delucia, DELUCIAL @dnc.org.
Great. Yeah, I don't know how to chat. I don't know how we chat into this. But yeah, mine is Joey, Joey, at theoptimizedteam.com. Again, Joey at theoptimizedteam.com. The name of the conference that I'm working on is called Ops Next. If you go to opsnext.co, you can sign up for our email list. We put it on for the first time last year, and we're looking to do something again next year, probably later in the year, to allow people to kind of settle into their jobs for the cycle. So we have someone who is, has worked on campaigns for a little while, has managed some local races in New York, but they're interested in getting into the state and national space. Laura, this is like a perfect question for you with your current job. Any advice for breaking into the state and national operations networks?
I think the passion to do it is number one. Honestly, it's a much smaller pool, so I think you're all in a good position this cycle. We had some amazing folks. A lot of folks on the 2020 cycle, they are tired, and they also have moved on to sort of administration jobs. They kind of want to live in DC, live in one place for like a little while. So this is just like the perfect opportunity, even if you don't have as much experience, to get your foot in the door. So send us your resumes. Honestly. sign up for any sort of other boot camps that the DNC or the DSEC is putting on. Spruce up your resume, like we were saying. And I think you have a really great chance of getting involved. The other thing I would just say, maybe it doesn't work this cycle for some reason. Anything you can do to volunteer in any of these, maybe it's on a local race or something like that, that extra sort of experience and just little anecdotes that you can point to are extremely helpful that anyone can do for free.
That's right. Yeah, I think highlighting something Laura said, a good thing to do, not to toot our own horns too much, but a good thing to do to break into the operation spaces, to email us your resume, and we'll get it to where it needs to go. So please do. Maybe someone can put it in the chat for everyone else, because we can't seem to figure out how to write into the chat. Could someone put our emails on there? Mine is joey@theoptimizedteam.com. If you can put it in the chat, and then I'll make sure that it's right. Does look good. Laura, that's yours?
Yep, that's perfect.
Awesome. Love it. All right. So we have another good question here. Are operations directors like COOs in business organizations? What is the relationship between operations directors and campaign managers?
Yeah, I would definitely describe them as a COO. So we're working on coordinated specifically, and every state has a slightly different structure. So the way that it works is there are state parties in each different state, Democratic state parties, and some of them have their own core state party staff. So in some states, I'm trying to think, like Nevada has a chief operating officer on the state party side. And then on the coordinated campaign side, you're going to have an operations director. So it kind of depends on the structure, but I would absolutely describe an operations director like a COO. You are the head of HR in most cases. You're overseeing sort of the finance and the budgeting. You're really at the top of the chain in terms of operations directors, and you report to the coordinated campaign director. And then similarly, if you're on a campaign, you would report to the state director, that sort of thing, or the campaign manager.
Yeah, totally. I think, as when I was COO for the Pete Buttigieg campaign, I basically felt like my department was essentially different aspects of the job that I was doing as an operations director in the state. It's very similar. Operations directors on a state level campaign are members of senior staff and are in those meetings. You really need that logistics mind to inform your strategy. And so, you're in constant contact with top people.
And I think I would also just say
question.
it's interesting, usually the way that it's structured. So you have that direct report of whoever is the leader of that organization in the state, but you also have sort of a dotted line to the sort of like headquarters or the national organizations, depending on what the organization is. So on a campaign, you have that dotted line into the operations team at the headquarters, which is a little bit different from what a COO was, but that also means that you have that extra support there.
Yeah, totally. Another question here, skills from a non-practicing attorney, a current business owner translating to operations.
Yeah. We dealt with the legal team every single day. I would consider them some of my good friends. We had, a multitude of attorneys on the campaign, and the operations department is responsible really for implementing a lot of the things. So the legal team is figuring out like, yes, this is the way we can do it. And then the operations team has to figure out a way in real life to operationalize that. So there's such a close relationship. I feel like I'm I don't know, honorary lawyer at this point or something, dealing with contracts. So it's helpful. Like, I think it would be extremely helpful to have that legal background because you sort of understand, what needs to be run by the legal team and just sort of that sort of thing. So maybe you could be interested in compliance is like a whole other branch. If you have any interest in that, there are so many legal aspects of compliance and making sure that the campaign is doing everything they need to do to stay compliant with the FEC and everything.
And also just to what we talked about before with another question, owning your own business is a really, really great way to be to show that you've done operations work. Like, you do operations work every day running your own business, and highlighting all of those budgeting and cash flow and hiring and systems development. I have a question here about sample org charts. That is very difficult to find. I would say a lot of campaigns don't have org charts that they like print out and have available because things are constantly evolving so rapidly. I think that it's, Laura, I don't know if you have a different opinion here, but it's just very, very different depending on every different campaign.
Yeah, I
It's
think
not
that's
really replicable.
100% true, but also, I have some sample ones from the presidential, an example that's not necessarily
Right.
real, but I would be happy to share that, if you want to reach out, just so you can get a sense of how it all ties together and what the other department heads are and that sort of thing, if you like.
Yeah. Awesome. Continue putting your questions in the chat. We're happy to, talk about your specific situation or general questions about operations. Again, there's operations that is like more the logistical field operations, IT, HR, advanced can even sometimes be considered operations. Scheduling is sometimes considered operations. It's really all about systems development. Rebecca, thank you. What would you say is the most difficult part of working in operations? Laura, I'm actually very interested to hear what you have to say here.
Oh my gosh. It's the most difficult. It's also the most like important and rewarding. I think at least currently is the relationship building and the working with partners and vendors, and it can make such a difference. So, I think typically we think of operations as we have a great system, let's just put it in place, send it out to the people. But figuring out how to communicate that correctly,
Yep.
to learn, every organization is different, every person is different, to figure out, what their priorities are. So I find that empathy is just huge, and trying to put yourself in their position and see like what are their priorities, why are they asking me for this, or think of, a lot of the time you're doing like all staff communication, so thinking about, does this make sense to this group of people, and kind of, so all of that communication is the relationship building. It's the most difficult in a sense, but it's also the most rewarding.
Yeah, I completely agree. Actually, I was going to say, like, specifically for me, when I think about the hardest parts of my jobs, it's that lateral management of other people on the campaign and other like department heads or directors, because operations is in a sense a service role. You are providing services to everyone else, but at the same time, there are times in the campaign where you need to tell them what to do, and you need to be able to build that trust with them. And so it's a very difficult dynamic sometimes when you want people to trust that you're always going to be able to get what they need, but then sometimes you have to direct what they're doing or tell them no. It's a tough line, but like Laura said, it's also really rewarding. And some of my best friends are people that I've had like yelling matches in the hallway with about like sending printers places. So
Yeah,
it's
100%.
yeah,
You're never in your own silo, right? Like it's not like you could
right.
just make a unilateral decision. You have to work with other departments, and you are exactly like you said. You're like supporting them. That's your entire role.
Right. Another great question for you, Laura. Considering the 2022 cycle, which states have the greatest and most urgent need for staff? Is it important to have prior relationships in a state when applying for jobs?
To the second question, I think it's helpful to have the relationship. Certainly, you're not an organizing staffer, but for example, being from New Hampshire and like understanding the dynamics, every state is a little bit different. So I would leverage, if you're interested in going back to that state, I would certainly leverage that if you have any sort of ties. But I definitely don't think that it's necessary. On the Obama campaign, I traveled to all different states, Indiana, Puerto Rico, and you can dive in once you figure out how it works. Right now, I think the states like Pennsylvania, if you are interested in a position there, Arizona, New Hampshire, there are a bunch of different states, and if you want to reach out, we can see what specific states have a need, but there's certainly a lot all the way across the United States.
Yeah, anywhere that The places that are going to hire operations are probably those larger statewide, right? The Senate races, the governor's races, the state parties in those states. And so, if you look at a map and you see what are the flippable or iffy states, purple states that are the large, even, it doesn't even have to be a large one, like you said, New Hampshire even, they're going to all be big races, and that means that they, a lot of staff, which means they need operations help. And so, applying there and through the DNC, like Laura said. Any other questions for us? Thank you all for the great questions, by the way. This has been really great.
Yeah, these were fantastic.
All right. If you have any last questions, please put them in now. Otherwise, we can go ahead and wrap up a little early. I guess, Laura, while we're waiting for people to ask questions, what is your just general advice to round things out for people who want to pursue a job or are interested in getting into operations?
I think there's so many things to say, but number one, I would say be open-minded and be flexible, both in terms of the position, the state, that sort of thing. If you're early enough in your career where you're willing to go that extra mile and move to Arizona, where they're having a hard time hiring staff, get your foot in the door. I think it's a great quote from Sheryl Sandberg. She was like, if you're offered a seat on the rocket ship, don't ask what seat it is, just get on the ship and get your foot in the door, right? It might not be the perfect position. Or for example, I took a little bit of a step back, in terms of like maybe you go to a deputy operations director because you want to get that experience, even though you have tons of experience. That can be a great way, if you're willing to do it, to get your foot in the door and get that operations specific experience. So yeah, be willing to get your hands dirty, be flexible, and just jump on it.
That's really good advice. I got my start in campaigns actually doing vetting for Hillary in headquarters, and I was like, I would take any job just to do this, and I did, and I eventually got asked to go to Iowa to help out with operations, and I was like, what is operations? And then fell in love with it. And so I think that's really, really good advice, to just go and do whatever you can, and you'll be rewarded both personally and professionally for doing that work. And I think that all the work that I've done that is not operations has really informed the way that I do operations work. The small amount of time that I spent organizing has informed every aspect of the work that I do. Someone wants us to talk about developing in deep red areas. It is tough, obviously, but I think those are areas of the country that you don't see as much investment, and so you have to work with less. And I think that really helps you to I don't really like the word scrappy, because I think it implies a lack of investment, but I think that that's what you're dealing with in a lot of those places. And the skills that you gain from having to basically do everything yourself is really important, and can be really applicable to a career in operations, because you just have to do it all when you're there.
Yeah, 100%. And just dive in. Sometimes this could be volunteer work. It's not going to get paid, but you can jump in and start that community building. And that's just really valuable experience if you're going to go on to operations, to understand how all of that works in a really tough position.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, if no further questions, thank you everyone for joining us. And thank you, Laura, for joining. This was a great discussion, just us. Who needs those other people? I think this is awesome. People can reach out to us. Our emails are in the chat. Laura, yours is Delucia L, DELUCIAL at dnc.org. And mine is Joey at theoptimizedteam.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Joey Pacific. And please send us your resumes. Ask, would love to chat, to talk about what is operations, how can you get into operations. Otherwise, have a great time at this conference, and we'll see you around.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Definitely reach out. Bye, guys.
All right, bye.